It is completely different than the WEF. I viewed the WEF as not a flagpole in the middle, but in fact, they are the flag. Whichever way the wind blew, so it blew. You should have solar, you should have wind. Why are you going to do solar and wind? Why would Europe agree to be net zero in 2030 when they don't make a battery? They don't make a battery. So if they go 2030, they are deciding to be subservient to China, who makes the batteries. Why would you do that? Why would the United States of America, which has oil and natural gas, try to convert to all electricity? China does not have oil and natural gas. Electricity and electric cars make perfect sense to them. That is practical and logical.
There you have it, guys. Howard Lutnick. So, guys, this isn't just Ottawa cutting a deal with China that opens part of Canada's auto market to Chinese electric vehicles, guys. The government is, Carney's saying this is pragmatic. Melanie Joly is all happy about it. But it says it's limited in the article, right? It says it's balanced. And when you actually look at what this deal signals, it's not confidence in Canada's auto sector. It's something else entirely. It's Ottawa quietly preparing for a future where the North American auto model no longer exists without even trying to save it first, guys. You know, the little wider story in this article specifically is Carney agreed to allow roughly 50,000 Chinese electric vehicles into Canada each year. So this is on a year-on-year basis at very low tariffs. In exchange, China reduced tariff barriers on Canadian products like canola, peas, and seafood. So the government's downplaying the auto concession. It's arguing that the import level simply returns Canada to previous volumes of around 40,000 cars. But look what we're trading. We're trading cars, very sophisticated and finished products, with food, guys. This article actually paints a much wider point that I want to talk about. Is that this deal strongly suggests that Ottawa is no longer betting on the survival of the cross-border auto system that Canada has relied on since the 1960s. Guys, this is what the real story is. And just to jump into the article here real quick. It goes, whatever you think of the wisdom of Mark Carney's trade deal with China, it's not a big vote of confidence for the future of Canada's auto industry, at least not the auto industry we have known. It was a move to jumpstart trade with the world's second largest economy, opening the big Chinese market to Canadian canola, peas, and seafood. Yet the concession that Mr. Carney made accepting imports of 49,000 Chinese vehicles a year with very low tariffs is a far bigger signal than he admitted. It suggests the Prime Minister is no longer betting big on the survival of the cross-border auto trade we have known since the 1960s. Mr. Carney's federal government is now shopping for new investors in Canada's auto sector from South Korea and China. He skipped out on Germany as well. I've really debunked on how idiotic it is to get the Germans in, specifically Volkswagen. I'm not going to go into it again. The Globe and Mail reported last week that the government plans to give foreign automakers that build cars in Canada preferential access to the Canadian market. That means searching for companies willing to build plants that would primarily sell to the relatively small Canadian market. Canada enticed automakers to come because of labor was typically cheaper in Canada. We had highly skilled labor, right? And we were on the border with the U.S., right? We had great supply chains between Ontario, Detroit, and all of those northern states that were manufacturing cars. That's what it's built. We also have steel mills in Ontario as well. So that whole thing is right there, right? And it's not just auto assembly. We have auto assembly, right? But we also have specialized parts manufacturers. We have like for actual vehicles. And then there's tier 1, tier 2 manufacturers and tier 3 manufacturers, and it's all a part of the wider auto industry framework that exists. Like, for instance, a large manufacturer is Linamar in Kitchener-Waterloo. They're in Guelph. But yeah, massive company. They make specialized auto parts. They also have a factory in Hungary. So all of these companies rely on selling to the U.S. auto market. right, for those assembly plants. So you can't just say, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. The U.S. market, who cares about it? It's the Canadian market is what matters. Now let's go open an assembly plant to cover 40 million people. You have to understand the supply chains. It's such a big gamble trying to get somebody to come into Canada without access to the U.S. market. It's unrealistic. Our whole structure right now is based on skilled labor. It's a little cheaper than the U.S. We have all of the inputs in Canada to be manufactured for sale into the U.S. That's how Toyota came. Toyota was heavily subsidized to come to Cambridge, Ontario. Heavily subsidized. It employs thousands of people in Cambridge, Ontario. And now what? Cars are just going to be more expensive because it's manufactured in Canada? This is the problem. You can't change that. You can't just bring in a different automaker for assembly in Canada without actually having access to the U.S. market. It's just unrealistic. And it goes, Ontario Premier Doug Ford doesn't like that idea. He called Mark Carney's deal a massive threat. Clearly, the Premier still hopes to save the old threatened model that sees Ontario plants assemble vehicles to be sold both in the U.S. and Canada. On Monday, he told reporters that China will never ever open a plant in Canada because it won't sell enough vehicles in Canada and the U.S. wouldn't accept them. I actually agree with this. This is 100% true. The president of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, Flavio Volpe, said Mark Carney's deal wasn't good for the auto industry, but he recognized the Prime Minister has to balance other interests. He noted that last year, Mr. Carney committed $5 billion to a strategic response fund aimed in large part at helping the industry. Still, the signal no longer seems to be all-out commitment to save the auto sector that was central to Liberal policy and politics under Justin Trudeau. He's not as bullish on autos as his predecessor, that's for sure, Mr. Volpe said. Perhaps that's a pragmatic calculation. Perhaps the former investment banker has looked at the numbers and doesn't see great prospects. The deal Mr. Carney made with China suggests that he's not totally convinced in its future anyway. I wouldn't put it this way, because you can't just look at it like that. You're employing hundreds of thousands of people, skilled labor in manufacturing in Ontario right now. If you don't know how to capitalize on that, honestly, you're just stupid. Or you're purposely being malicious towards that industry specifically. There is no way that level of manufacturing can be replaced anywhere in Canada at the moment. All of that skilled labor just simply exists in Ontario. And if it's not profitable right now, it's probably because you haven't made a frickin' USMCA deal or a CUSMA, however they're renaming it, doesn't really matter. They haven't revamped it. That's Carney's problem. And I'm going to stop reading the article. I want to get into, my thoughts and the way I see all of this. Essentially, the way I see this is Ottawa is walking away from the North American auto model without even actually trying to renegotiate it, right? So if Ottawa actually believed that the North American auto model was salvageable, this deal would make no sense. And it's quite simple. Canada's auto sector is not a standalone industry. It's an integrated continental system based on assembly plants in Ontario, hundreds of Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 suppliers, specialized parts manufacturers, tooling, electronics, drivetrains, logistics, and engineering, guys. It's an entire ecosystem. There's hundreds of thousands of people directly or indirectly employed in the auto industry in Canada. You don't abandon something of that scale casually, right? It's foolish, honestly. And it just might be malicious. We don't really know. But it's being framed as this big win. So the first question should be obvious, guys. Where is the evidence that Carney even attempted a serious negotiation with Donald Trump to stabilize or redesign the continental auto framework? Where's this USMCA deal? Where's the steel deal? There's nothing in the article. There's nothing in public records. There's no emergency talks. There's no revised USMCA proposal. And no attempt to tie cars to security cooperation or continental supply chains. He's done none of the above. None. So this doesn't read like we tried and we failed. It reads like we moved on without trying. Guys, you can't read that as pragmatism. That's actually gross negligence toward one of Canada's last major manufacturing pillars. Outside of the car industry, Canada doesn't actually manufacture anything of like serious consequence. Guys, you can't look at this just as cars versus agri-food. Its industrial capacity is being traded for commodity access that can disappear. The government is framing this as a trade-off. You have cars on the one side, you have agri-food on the other side, right? But they're not equivalent assets. Cars represent long-term capital investment, skilled labor, deep supply chains, technology and tooling, communities built around production. You have agri-food exports to China are different because they're commodity driven, they're price sensitive, they're politically vulnerable, and they're frequently used by Beijing as leverage. And this article actually admits this access could be temporary. So essentially what's happening is Canada is agreeing to trade something very durable for something extremely fragile. And I know, the good farmers in Saskatchewan are hurting because of, they don't have, again, the USMCA deal hasn't been renegotiated, so they're hurting because they have no one to trade with, right? So now they're happy that they have access to China. Whoop-de-doo though, because you could just be selling to the US and making that money, but our good prime minister hasn't actually renegotiated the most sensitive deal for Canada at the moment. So this is not a neutral exchange, guys. This is an asymmetric one. It reinforces the signal that Ottawa is no longer willing to fight to preserve cars as a core sovereign industry. The China pivot itself is just going to trigger more US hardening because Canada can't realistically hedge its way out of dependence from the US. This is something that most people are really avoiding to say out loud. Canada is not a swing power. We're not some big Carney could say that we're an energy superpower, we're this and that, but Canada is not a free-floating middle state either. Canada depends on the United States for its security, for its market access, continental supply chains, and actual strategic depth. So when Ottawa signals drift toward China in a strategic sector like autos, Washington does not see independence, it sees risk. And great powers do not tolerate strategic drift in their immediate sphere. And that's exactly what Canada is. Canada is in the North American sphere, in the US sphere of influence. It's just the way it is. And we've lulled ourselves even further into that dependence. So Washington will not allow Canada to fall under another power's influence in any meaningful way. Not emotionally, structurally. And the response will not be accommodation, guys. It will be more hardening. Stricter rules of origin, tighter security screening, less tolerance for deviation, faster decoupling on US terms, not Canada's. And that's why this move doesn't pressure Washington, guys. It just confirms Washington's doubts even further. And why all of this really matters for Canadians, and I'm going to tie it off here as well. Guys, this isn't about liking or disliking China. It's not about the personalities. It's about responsibility. Auto manufacturing supports real communities, real workers, real businesses that cannot pivot overnight. Walking away from that system without exhausting the only negotiation that actually matters is not strategy, it's avoidance. It's quite literally playground politics. This China deal isn't a bold new direction, guys. It's a quiet admission. Ottawa no longer believes the North American auto model can be saved, and instead of fighting for it, it's just hedging emotionally and repositioning rhetorically. But Canada cannot signal drift without consequences, guys. And it cannot replace U.S. dependence with wishful thinking. And this is exactly what the Canadian government is doing. Before you pivot anywhere, you negotiate first. Before you concede, you exhaust leverage. Ottawa skipped those steps completely. And this is why this deal doesn't look like confidence. It looks like surrender dressed up as pragmatism. This is all I have for you guys today. I'd love to hear your comments in the comment section below. Please like, share, and subscribe. My name is Miloš Krajčnik. Stay curious, stay informed, and God bless Canada.
This is Canada. Maple syrup and like Captain Kick your ass all hockey season, Mounties be riding horses,